What's up, everybody? This is episode 1 of the Preparing You for Life podcast, brought to you by Old City CrossFit. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to kick this off. This is about take 800. I've been sitting here in front of my computer, in front of this microphone, just recording and deleting and listening to it and saying like, wow, I sound so stupid. This is ridiculous. Nobody's going to listen to this. Why am I doing this? I'm not good enough to be talking to anybody. And anyway, F it. I just decided to press record and not stop the recording for any reason. And this is going to be the first ever podcast. So hopefully you guys get something out of it. One of my goals with it, the gym just turned 4 years old, which is a crazy milestone. It just absolutely blows my mind. And as I was like, I put together a video sort of celebrating very quickly the 4 years that we've done. And I realized how incredibly grateful and blessed, whatever that means, how incredibly grateful I am and we are as Old City CrossFit to have gotten to work with so many amazing and incredible people. I just think back through the 4 years and the hundreds, if not thousands of people I've met and interacted with, and what I've learned personally through this experience and what I've learned from other people through this experience. And I thought that it would be a pretty fun way to sort of just start talking to people and recording those conversations and letting you guys get something out of the conversations that we're having with people every single day. And some of these will be about fitness. Some of them will be more about life or, really whatever. I'm just mostly interested in talking to people who are connected through our gym and sharing their stories and their experiences to you guys, the greater gym or, whatever greater global audience, and in the hope that you sort of get something out of this. And so as I was sort of sitting around thinking about what the first episode might be or what the first episode might look like, I figured there really isn't a much better way to start than sort of who I am, how I got into CrossFit, and how my sister Erin and I essentially started what is Old City CrossFit. So yeah, I guess we'll just start from the very beginning. It was a dark, stormy night in 1982, and no, I'm just kidding. But more seriously, I've spent my whole life as an athlete, and I never really thought of myself as an athlete until probably the mid 90s when my swimming career really picked up. But as a kid, I would just play every single sport I possibly could. My dad from early on would take me and my sisters out and just play any sport we could and get outside, play sports. Don't stay inside. That sort of approach was kind of how I grew up and how I started, I guess, living my life. But yeah, so I fell in love with sports, with competition. And very early on, primarily because my older sister, Erin, was swimming, and my mom was, in her mind, was saying, if I'm taking Erin to swim practice, Sean's going to swim practice too. And so I got dragged along to swim practice for a little bit and ultimately really fell in love with the sport. And I've been swimming basically as far back as I can remember. I swam for this team in Northern Virginia, the Quantico Devil Dolphins, and it was in the Marine base in Quantico, Virginia. And anyway, it was a really fun experience. And I remember at that point realizing probably for the first time that I was actually good at something, that I was like, this was a talent I had. And I was pretty lucky to find something that I was good at when I was that young. But anyway, fast forward to San Antonio. We moved to San Antonio, Texas, and that's really where I started to grow up as a swimmer. And I was also playing other sports. I did soccer. I think I did some track and field. I played basketball in 7th grade. And I just played any sport that I could. And it was a lot of fun. But turning into high school, I had to make a decision between probably what were my two best sports at that time, soccer and swimming. And I chose swimming. I was really good at it. I had a lot of friends in swimming. There was a great swim program pretty close to where we lived, and I was just really excited to see what I could do in swimming. And so that's what I did. I started swimming. In high school, I was doing 2 workouts a day pretty much my entire high school career. We would start off, I think it was 6:45 to 8:45 every morning, or Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever. The details aren't important. And then we would do practice every afternoon. And I remember my sophomore year, I made it onto the senior team. The senior team. It was like the elite swim team for the area that we lived in, and it was real serious. They tracked attendance, and I mean we're not talking like 3 times per week attendance. We're talking like every single morning, every single afternoon, weights. And if you had an attendance that was like below 92%, then that wasn't good enough. You had to be 99%. And if you were going to miss practice, man, you better tell your coaches why you weren't there. And so that was my experience all through high school. And it was fantastic. And I got to become a pretty good swimmer. And in the process, I really learned a lot about myself and my weaknesses. I remember somewhere like, you know, swimming that much and being that involved in a sport is, I mean, for anyone who's done sports in general, you probably know, or done anything hard, I guess, in life, is that experience teaches you so much about who you are and what your limitations are. And I remember one of the very early things that I struggled with was just like learning how to constantly push myself to the absolute limit of what it is I'm capable of. And swimming through high school sort of, I don't think I figured out all the answers there, but there were certainly moments where I realized, like, holy cow, my body can do so much more than my mind wants it to. And if I can control the mental approach to this process, then I can really control the physical approach. And I remember there was one day we were setting goals for the season, and Coach Block, who was a coach there, who just an absolute incredible coach and great mentor and general human. He pulled us out of practice to set our goals. Anytime you get out of practice, you want to milk that. So I was trying to talk very slowly through my goals and explain in a lot of detail what it is that I wanted. And anyway, Coach Block eventually stopped me and was like, all right, so what's the point? What's the goal you want to get to? And I told him, I said, I want to be on the podium. I want to be top 3 at our state swim meet at the end of the season. I want to get a medal. And for those of you who don't know much about Texas swimming, it's super competitive, and just even making it to the state meet is an absolute accomplishment. But, you know, I'd made it there before as a junior, and like I was really confident I could make it back. And one of these stretch goals, one of these long like range goals that I thought that I had the potential of achieving was getting on the podium, just stepping foot on the podium. And I remember my coach just looking at me and shaking his head. He was like, no. And I was like, okay. Okay. My goal is to be top 8 at state. And he was like, wrong direction. And then I was like, so my goal's to win state? And he was like, bingo. And I almost had to whisper it because I didn't know that was something that you were allowed to want. Like, I didn't know that you were allowed to want to be the best at something. I didn't know that was even a possibility, that was an option. And Coach Block, he told me, not only is it an option, it's oftentimes the only option. And as we started to like finalize the goals and like figure out the events and everything, it became clear to me that if I didn't have a goal that was to be the best, then I wouldn't have had the motivation. I wouldn't have had the desire to really push myself as hard as I need to push myself to really achieve the amount of work that's required to achieve to get to that goal. But anyway, this is a huge digression into what I started this conversation about. But anyway, the point was, every single day from then on out, when I was in the pool, when I was training, obviously there were good days and there were bad days, but the thing that stuck in the back of my mind was I have to work harder than every single person in the state of Texas if I want to achieve my goal. And having that mindset of I had to be the hardest worker was the mental edge, or the mental thing that I needed to sort of push myself into the framework to actually get what I wanted out of swimming and out of the sport. And so because of that really strong goal setting, and then, you know, the year of training that followed that, I was able to make it to the state swim meet, and I had one of the best times in the state going in, and I ultimately finished in second place. And it was weird because it was like finishing in second was both at the same time extremely devastating, but also extremely rewarding. You know, at the very beginning of the season, my goal was maybe I could squeak onto the podium, and now I was competing for that gold medal. And so I went on from high school swimming. I got recruited to swim for the Naval Academy, and I'd always wanted to go. I'd always wanted to go to the Naval Academy. My dad went there, my sister went there, and I was like, this is where I want to go. And I was always thinking about the Naval Academy in the context of being a swimmer, and I wanted to swim for the Naval Academy, and this would be awesome. And I never really thought, this is weird and maybe a little short-sighted, but I never really thought of the Naval Academy as the place you go to like join the Navy. I mean, I knew that was going to happen. I knew that if you go to the Naval Academy, you join the Navy, but I never really thought about it. I never really fully digested what that meant, but I didn't care. That's where I wanted to go. And when I got accepted to the Naval Academy, I didn't even think twice. I actually didn't even apply to another place. That's it's the only place I applied to, and luckily I got accepted, and so off I went. And I swam for 4 years at the Naval Academy, and it was both the hardest thing I've ever done, physically, mentally, emotionally, just everything combined, and one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. And at the Naval Academy, I sort of completed this journey, this personal journey that I was taking to understanding myself and to becoming the person who could actually, like, I had control over the decisions in my life in a weird way. And I guess the best way to describe it is, we've all had those times where you show up and you know, to whatever it is. Maybe it's work, or maybe it's a workout. For me specifically, it was I would show up to morning practice or afternoon practice, and my body would just be so tired and my mind was just so exhausted. And the last thing in the world I wanted to do was work out. Last thing I wanted to do was jump in the cold water and be miserable for 2 hours. And for probably the first 3 years of my swimming career, I let that negative self-talk, I let that creep in and dominate and control my existence, and let it like seep into everything that exists in my head. And my senior year, you know, it was my last year of swimming, and let's, you know, do this right, go out with a bang, and let's crush it. Let's make this the best season I've ever had. And one of the things that I did to overcome this extreme negative self-talk that I was having is something that I now call Seanformation. So basically, I would say bold-faced lies that I knew were absolute malarkey, and I would say them confidently and proudly. So for example, we'd be at a morning practice, and they'd be like, all right, here's the warm up, whatever. I'd be like, woo! And I'd jump in, I'd be the first one in the water, and I'd start talking crap to everybody else behind me, like, come on boys, the fun's starting, join me now, or whatever. And I like, obviously I didn't believe that. It was just this sarcastic approach to positivity that I started taking. And I made it a rule. I would always be the first one in the water, and I would always swim my first lap with extreme passion and enthusiasm. And what I started finding is that after faking it for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month, I started dreading showing up to the water, showing up to the pool less. I started really not fearing all the things and all the stuff that I feared before, and how if you fill your head with positive self-talk, that the ability for negative self-talk, like it can't get in. Like I was pushing out so much positivity, so much fake, just bullcrap positivity. I was pushing it out so aggressively that negative talk couldn't come in. And I mean, it would be to the point where, I mean, in swim practice, you're alone. Like it's your head, and that's all you got. There's no music to distract. There's nothing. It's just you, cold water, and a black line in the bottom of the pool. And I would just constantly say over and over again, I love this. I love this. I love this. I'm so happy I'm here. I love this. This is the best time of my life. This is amazing. This is great. And just a steady stream of positive self-talk. Like if I stop talking for just 1 second, whoosh, the flood of negativity, like, oh, this sucks. What am I doing here? Oh, my body hurts. I'm tired. All this homework I had, like, that would creep in. And so I think largely because of that, my senior years was one of the most successful years in swimming I've ever had. I finally like saw what it was that I was capable of doing with my body. And I guess all of this is to sort of circle back to the point of what it is that I'm trying to talk about today, is this idea that when you endeavor to do something hard, that moment that you choose to do something hard, you're choosing to swim or to study to pass this exam, but really what you're doing is you're endeavoring to learn about yourself and to improve yourself so that you can rise to whatever challenge you decide to give yourself. And I didn't realize that that's what I was doing at the time. But by the time swimming was over, I realized that's what I had done. I had learned so much about myself that I was able to take those lessons and apply them to whatever challenge came. And I literally felt mentally unstoppable. And that experience, that swimming experience, was probably one of the most important experiences I could have ever had for the next challenge of my life, which ended up being becoming a submariner in the Navy. And for those of you who don't know much about my academic prowess at the Naval Academy, we can just say it was subpar. I never got an A in college. A lot of C's and D's. I think I graduated with a 2.1 something. Yeah, it was a very poor showing. And in order to become a submariner at the Naval Academy, you have to do this really extensive interview process, and you have to screen with the 4-star admiral who's in charge of the whole nuclear Navy program. And I remember walking into his office and sitting down at his desk, and he like looks at the resume, like with all my grades and everything that I've done at the Naval Academy. He looks at my resume and he kind of looks at me and he like looks back at this resume and he says, "You've gotten C's and D's in every single course required in the Navy nuclear program. Why the hell should I let you into my program?" And like, I felt my heart beating through my chest, and I was super nervous, and I didn't know what to say. And I don't even remember to this day exactly what I said, but it must have been brilliant because he accepted me into the program. And I walked out and he said, "Congratulations, welcome to the Navy nuclear power program." And I walked out. And I remember having this moment of relief and this moment of extreme happiness right before, literally moments before this sheer terror swooped across my entire existence. I went from being so proud of being accepted into the program to thinking like, "Oh no, what have I done? I'm terrible at thermodynamics and double E and mechanical engineering and systems, and this is going to be ugly." And anyway, so I graduated, went on to Navy Nuclear Power School down in Charleston, South Carolina. And because my grades were so subpar, I had to do a 3-week basically a 3-week course where they teach you all the stuff that they're going to teach you so that you have more time to learn it. And believe me, it wasn't nearly enough time. So we started Nuclear Power School, and this school was one of the most demanding experiences of my life. It was the hands down the hardest thing that I've ever done. And there's absolutely no way that I could have ever gotten anywhere close to being successful in that program if it wasn't for the lessons that I learned in swimming. And just to kind of give you a framework for what this program was all about, you show up to school and technically everything that you're learning is confidential, or whatever the classification is. Like, you're not allowed to take any books or anything that you're learning outside of the school building. And the school building is a secure place, and so you have to scan in and out with your ID, and that's the only way you can get in and out of the building. So the school tracks the hours that you are inside the building, and they mandate that you have to spend 20 hours studying each week. So you have to be inside the building for 20 hours each week, outside of your normal school hours, which are 7 to 4. So outside the hours of 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., you have to spend 20 hours of that studying. So I put in, for the first week, I put in my 20 hours, and I was working really hard, the hardest I've ever worked. And I got the first test back, and I had literally never in my life been more prepared for a test. And I got the first test score back, and it was a 2.72. And you needed a 2.50 to pass. And so I barely passed. And that was the hardest I've ever worked, ever. And I barely passed. It's like, oh no, we're in for some trouble. But thankfully, because of the lessons that I learned through my swimming career and everything that being an athlete taught me, I was able to just be like, all right, it's no big deal. This has nothing on, 2-a-days and waking up and swimming and pushing myself physically. Like, this is just sitting in a chair and studying. I can do that. So from that moment on, I resolved myself. I said, I'm going to be in the schoolhouse every single morning at 5 a.m. Every single morning, Saturdays, Sundays, doesn't matter. I'm going to be in there. I'm going to study on weekdays. I'm going to study from 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. and I'm going to be there. I'm going to be present and I'm going to crush it. And then the school day would start from 7 to 4, and I would try my best to stay focused and stay attention during the school day. And then right at 4 o'clock, back to the grind, back to the study hall. I had this whiteboard and I would just write and erase, trying to memorize as much stuff as I could. And most nights I'd stay in the schoolhouse, 4 to 8, 4 to 9, sometimes 10 o'clock, go get dinner, come back to the schoolhouse, study some more. And this was every single day. Like weekends, I would show up at the schoolhouse at 5 a.m. and I would study until I couldn't take it anymore and, go home and sleep or whatever, 2 p.m., 3 p.m., however long I could take it. And eventually it got to the end of our nuclear power school, and I took this test. And so, well, actually, I guess backing up just a little bit. So obviously 20 hours wasn't enough, crept up to 25 hours. Eventually I got put on mandatory plus 30s because my grades weren't so good. And in the last few weeks of the school, when I was studying for the final exam, I was voluntarily doing 50 additional hours outside of the school hours. I was living there, literally living there. I'd show up with like a cooler that was all of my food for the day, and I just wouldn't leave. And I said, if I'm going to fail out of this program, I'm going to fail out looking at everybody and saying there is absolutely no way that I could have worked any harder, that I could have done any better. And so that's what I did, 50 hours. And I remember getting a call from one of my friends after the grades were posted, and he goes, you want me to tell you your score? And I was like, oh, yes. And I got a 2.53 on the final, and I finished the whole course with a 2.67. I was happier than I've ever been in my entire life. I was so relieved. I was so pumped. I was so excited. And that was it. That was my time in Charleston. Went on to nuclear power school, and there was another 6-month training school there. This was all hands-on curriculum, hands-on stuff, equally as hard, equally as challenging, but I took the same lessons, the same things that I had cultivated through my athletic career, and I applied them to that. And this was a lot more in the moment stress, not necessarily the hard work component, but in swimming or anytime that you're competing in something it's now, you train for 9 months for a 2-minute race, hopefully a lot less than 2 minutes, but you train for so long for this one moment. And in the nuclear training program, you get put in these positions where you're managing the reactor, and then they call them casualties, but bad things happen to the reactor on purpose for the purposes of training. And you have to critically think on your feet and immediately and solve the problem and put the plant in a safe position and guide the plant out of whatever looming disaster is coming. And so I remember going into those watches that I would stand where I knew these casualties were coming. And I remember feeling that same sense of nervousness that I would feel before a race. And because of everything that I learned through swimming, I was able to breathe and calm down and just take control of my emotions, I guess, but also use that moment to fuel better performance. Like one thing that anyone who's ever been in a super competitive environment knows, that they can compete better in that pressure-filled moment than they ever could on their own, right? Like take a pool, it's the same pool, it's the same race, it's the same me. But when you add your whole teammate, when you add a stand full of fans and your parents are there watching and all of this expectation is on you, now that's the moment, right? That's how, and that moment was sort of it was one of these things that like I created a love-hate relationship with that moment, because it's always there's always so much anxiety that leads up to it. But that moment that you finish and you perform well and you win the race, or, you do well in the race, and you're just like, this is amazing. That's just such a good feeling. And so I took those lessons and I applied them to the power school approach. And in order to graduate from the prototype training, you have to pass like a practicum. You have to pass a trial watch, which I was able to do pretty well. And then you have to pass a board. And there's 3 people, and it's you, and it's a whiteboard, and they can ask you anything they want pertaining to nuclear power. Any question in the world that they want, they can just ask you, and then you just start writing, and you start explaining, and you start telling them what you know. So 2 hours later, they asked me to step outside. They deliberate my future. I come back inside, and they say, "Congratulations, Sean." Well, congratulations, Lieutenant Emery. You passed. But barely. They literally said that. They said, "Congratulations, you passed, but barely." And I was like, I started to float. It was one of the best feelings I've ever had in my entire life. And so I go from there, and then I show up on a submarine. And for the past year of my life, and even probably 5 years if you count my experience at the Naval Academy, it was just constant, like, suppression in ways, like constantly, like, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, like, you don't know what you're talking about, you're dumb, like, barely scraping by, right? My grades were barely adequate. I barely graduated. I barely made it out of prototype training. I barely made it out of nuclear power school. And then I got to the boat, and I showed up to the boat, and then the boat was just a totally different environment. The boat was like, yeah, you had to know things, but it was much more about how you dealt with people and how you managed people, and way much less about if you knew how to do this really intense calculus problem, or if you knew how to solve this reactor power equation, or, whatever. Like, certainly you needed to know that, but like, leadership on the boat, being an officer on the boat, was much more about how you dealt with people. And that's when I realized, like, yeah, like this is going to work out. Like, I'm pretty good at this stuff. And so I spent 3 years on the submarine, and after sort of paying my dues in the reactor, back aft is what they call it. Then, yeah, so after that, I moved to a job that was up for it. I was the assistant weapons officer, and I was given this collateral duty of being the morale, welfare, recreation officer. And for most people, it's a super side job. Most people don't take it very seriously. You're in charge of the ship's hats and coins, and you do some fundraising so that the crew can have a Christmas party, and you're also technically in charge of the workout equipment on the boat. And one thing that I really struggled with after leaving the Naval Academy, primarily because I just didn't have time to work out. I was in school all the time, and I was so focused on school, and it was so draining. I would swim a tiny little bit, but most of the time, like, I just wasn't working out. It was really hard for me to do anything physical. And so when I got onto the submarine, this was like, P90X was getting really big at the time. And I remember, like, watching the infomercial one day, like, oh man, there's something to this. Let me get the DVD or CD packs or whatever it was. And I got P90X. And one of the roles that I had as MWR officer was in charge of the workout equipment on the submarine, which is sparse. When I started, there was a submarine there was a treadmill in the engine room of the submarine, and the only way that you could work out on it was to run on the back right quarter, because there was a huge pipe coming down, and you sort of had to run with your head cocked off to your side, and that was basically it. And so we're ramping up for our second deployment, and I'm on a mission to change this. Like, I'm on a mission to make the MWR program on the USS Scranton the best MWR program in the world. I mean, I cared way more about the MWR program than I did about weapons officer or navigation or standing watch. Like, my mind was always like, how can I turn MWR into something huge? And so we started raising money. I would do these raffles for like iPods. This was when iPods were really big. We'd raffle off iPods. We'd raffle off Nintendo Wiis. I took a trip with my buddy Townie up to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and we sold Scranton sub stuff to the Scranton vets of Pennsylvania to raise money for our crew. We raised so much money for our crew. We threw a Christmas party in the downtown Marriott and had $10,000 worth of free raffle prizes. It was absolutely the highlight, one of the highlights of my life. And so we did all that. So the other component was this workout equipment. So I was in charge. I was the person primarily responsible for, or the only person really responsible for ensuring that the boat had workout equipment. And I remember going to the carriers. The carriers get all the Gucci stuff. They get all like rows of ellipticals, rowing machines, treadmills, like you name it, a carrier can get it. And so I went to the carriers. And the problem with the submarine is that the hatch is only so big. Like the hatch is barely big enough to fit torpedoes and fat people. I'm just kidding about there's a joke in the submarine. Like you go down and then you spend a 6-month underway or whatever. You spend 2 months out to sea and you eat all the dessert. And the joke is like, you better be hatchable when this is over. Like you better be able to fit back out of the hatch. Anyway, so I was on a mission to make this, the Scranton, the best workout facility on the planet. So I would go to the carriers and I would get all this free workout equipment from the carriers. But the problem is it wouldn't fit onto the boat. It wouldn't fit down the hatch. So whenever I had duty, I would have the treadmill delivered or whatever it was. And I'd get the ship's welder out there and we'd be cutting the workout equipment down, and the ship's electrician out there detaching all the electrical components. And then we'd take down, literally piece by piece, we'd take down the treadmill or the elliptical or the Stairmaster or the rowing machine, whatever it was. We'd take all these things down and then we'd literally build them back in the right spot on the boat. So as we're getting ready for the deployment, I got P90X and I put P90X out to all the crew, and everybody had it on their iPod touches, and everybody was super jazzed about transforming their life through this deployment and fitness. And we had all these fitness challenges. And I think by the time we went out to sea, I had like 2 or 3 TRXs. I had all these little band things. I had the Bowflex dumbbell set that you could adjust. I had a few benches. I had like pull-up bars everywhere that you could think of pull-up bars. I had, I think I said a stair stepper. I had a rowing machine. I had a spin bike. I had another exercise bike. It was incredible. I just had so much fitness equipment on there. And then the crazy thing was people were actually using it. Like it was absolutely incredible. I think the ship ran out of tuna in the first month because everybody was working out and then getting their protein in. And the captain was was doing P90X every single day, and the XO was too. And we're all committed, like in probably the worst fitness environment on the planet. We're all like, everyone's committed to working out. And I remember getting off watch and just going back on the treadmill and like literally running. Like I was just running, and it just felt so good. And this was one of the first times in my life where I was able to recreate that feeling of just wanting to exercise and wanting to be there and just doing it because it felt good. And it was awesome. And so we transferred off the submarine. I mean, the crew must have lost thousands of pounds. It was just really cool. It was really cool to watch. We had a weight loss challenge during that deployment, and I tried to plump up as best as I could. Before we left, I was eating everything imaginable. I was trying to gain weight, and I was trying to like win the challenge. So I plumped up to 250, 260, something like that, and then lost 30 or 40 pounds. But there was a guy who lost close to 100 pounds on a deployment. And it was really rewarding. And I think what's crazy about the story is like seeing where I am now with my life, seeing where I am now, seeing that like what I've built through the gym, and obviously with the help of the team, but leading people through fitness. When I was going through this on the submarine, it wasn't even in my consciousness. I wasn't like, oh, well, clearly this is what I'm going to do with my future. Like when I was going through that, I was like, well, I'm a submariner, and I'm like, I take care of people. This is what I do. And this is my passion. So it's interesting how when you look back at your life, it's a straight line. And, when you're going through life, it just feels crazy and chaotic, and like every step just feels like you don't know where you're going. So I transfer off the submarine, and I remember like there's a few weeks I was moving out to California. I got stationed out in San Diego, and I was moving out there, and there was a few weeks before I started the road trip and got across, and I remember just losing that desire to constantly work out, like losing that edge, that drive, that mission. And my body just started to feel like crap again. My knees started to hurt. My back started to hurt. I just started to feel crappy again. I remember that whole drive cross country. I was just telling myself, like, I'm gonna find a gym. I'm gonna get back in shape. I'm gonna get back into my swimming shape. I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna do it, and it's gonna be awesome. And up to this point, I hadn't heard of CrossFit. I had no idea really what it was. I think maybe one of my old swim friends was like, yeah, I'm doing this CrossFit thing, and whatever. You know, I didn't know what it was. This was 2008, 2009, something like that. Maybe summer of 2008, I think, or summer of 2009. It doesn't matter. I'm driving across country, and it's like a 4-day pep talk. Like, you got this, Sean. You're going to get in great shape. This is going to be awesome. So I land, I get a house in Coronado, and I land, and I didn't know this at the time, but Coronado is like literally like where the SEALs train, where Bud's training is. One of the most hardcore training, whatever in the world. So I land there, and I show up there, I get my house, and then next stop. Well, first stop, I bought a big green egg, but that's a whole nother podcast. But I started to looking for gyms, and I found this place on Google called CrossFit Coronado. And I was like, oh, I'll go give this a shot, or like swing by and see what it's all about. And it was a Saturday morning, and I was walking by the gym, and it was this garage gym thing. And I was walking by, and it was in an alley and kind of hard to find, and I wasn't sure if it was it, and didn't look like any gym I knew. And I was kind of walking by and like peeking in, and the first thing that happened, like once I sort of like got right in front of the gym, this guy, Dave Kane, I'll never forget this. He comes out, stops his workout in the middle, like sets his barbell down, comes out, takes his hand out. Hey, what's going on? I'm Dave Kane. I was like, hey, Dave, I'm Sean. He's like, have you tried CrossFit before? You want to come in? Come on in. And it was like, hey, Steve, this is Sean. He's looking to try out CrossFit. And then he picked his barbell up and I guess finished the workout. And at the time I was like, holy cow, this is so amazing. These guys are so friendly. And then, you know, like looking back at it, he probably just wanted a break from his workout. But I met this guy, Steve Mitchell, who he was actually an instructor for the Buds program. He's a SEAL instructor for the Buds program, and one of the most intimidating people I've ever met in my entire life. But he comes up and he's like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. 5 pull-ups, 10 push-ups, 15 air squats. It's a workout called Cindy. 20 is a pretty good score. We'll see how you do. And I still had this ego. I still had this mindset of a former collegiate swimmer, of this physical specimen, this incredible athlete. I was like, 20 is a good score. Watch me get 30. And so I set off, and I 20 minutes on the clock. He says, go. First round, pull-ups, push-ups, air squats, pull-up, push-up. I probably finished 5 rounds in like 3 minutes flat. Easy. And then something hit me. It's this experience. I mean, I just ran into a wall. My body just stopped working. I couldn't do pull-ups. Push-ups were really hard. Squats were miserable. And it took me 17 minutes, 16 minutes to finish the next probably 3 or 4 rounds. I finished with like 8 or 9 rounds. I forget exactly my score. And he comes up and he goes, hey, what was your score? I go, 8, 9, something like that. He goes, that's pretty bad. And I was hooked. I mean, that's all I needed, right? Like this was literally made for me. This gym had the environment, like had the teamwork, everything that I was missing in my, you know, like when I was trying to do things on my own. This CrossFit gym had it. They had this coach who would push me, who knew how to motivate me, to drive me to work harder, to do better. It had like the community in the gym was just incredible. It was absolutely incredible. I signed up. I'd go out to sea for 2 or 3 weeks, and I'd come back with like 50 missed text messages and calls like, hey, Sean, where you at? Where you at? We miss you. And it was absolutely one of the best experiences I had. It was amazing. And I just noticed my fitness just transforming, and I felt like I felt better than I'd ever felt in my entire life. And I loved it. And it was one of those times in my life where like not only did I want it, but I needed it. And it was amazing. And that feeling, like every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday through Friday, I'd just show up 4:00. That was my class. I'd be at the gym at 3:30, stretching, getting ready. And that was my day. And it was great. And I loved every single minute of it. And, after about 6 months, maybe a year, my knees started to hurt. My back started to hurt a little bit. So I was like, all right, man, well, let's go see a physical therapist. So I went to a Navy physical therapist. I went to other physical therapists. I tried some yoga classes, and I just couldn't shake this knee pain that I was having. And I was also just a rabid consumer of everything on, like literally everything on the internet. And at the time, the only real place that you could get CrossFit stuff was through the CrossFit Journal. And so I would go on these international plane trips, to Singapore or India or wherever we'd go, and I would download just hours of videos and hours of content, and I would just consume. And through that process, I met this guy. I didn't meet him in person yet, but I met him, Dr. Kelly Starrett of now Mobility WOD fame and Supple Leopard fame. But at the time, he was just a physical therapist who contributed a lot to the CrossFit Journal. And he introduced me to this concept. So I tried to get my knee fixed, and everybody that I went to was talking about how you shouldn't be squatting. You shouldn't be doing these movements. These movements are bad for you or painful for you. And it just didn't stick with me. It didn't make any sense. Like I'm watching basketball every night, people younger than me, people older than me, being able to play basketball, and their bodies are able to hold up. I'm watching in the Olympics, people are lifting 2-3 times their body weight over their head in a deep, deep squat, and their bodies are holding up. So I don't want you to tell me what to do not to have pain in my body. I want you to tell me what I need to do to make my body ready for more of what I want to give it. And none of the physical therapists that I went to at the time had the answers, but this guy, Dr. Kelly Starrett, he had the answers. And there was this one article. It was like, knee pain, look upstream and downstream. And basically what the article said is, if your knee hurts, look at how well your hip range of motion, look at, how supple your quad is, look at your calves, look at your hamstrings, like look at all the areas around the knee and address those. And there's a good chance your knee is going to start feeling better. And so I did all the exercises religiously that he had me do. And lo and behold, my knee started to feel really good, started to feel better. And so right around that time, he started posting a mobility workout of the day, a stretching exercise to do every single day. And his mission was to do an entire year instruction of what to do every single day to make your body feel better, called the Mobility Project. And it was the very beginning of the Mobility WOD. And boy, that was amazing. I followed every single one of those, and it transformed my life. It made me feel so good, and it was incredible. And by watching all these videos, it's amazing. And by reading all these articles, it's amazing how much you learn about CrossFit and about everything. And so backing up to talk about how my sister got into CrossFit, because we started the gym together. So I finished that very first workout with Steve Mitchell, that Cindy workout, and I was walking home, and I like called my sister and I said, Erin, I found it. It's perfect. I found the best exercise program, the best system I've ever found. It's amazing. I'm not sure exactly what it is yet, but I know it's for me 100%. And she goes, is it CrossFit? And I was like, how'd you know? And she was like, I did one too. And we literally both did our first CrossFit workout on the exact same day and talked about it. And it was awesome. So her journey is like, I'll get her to tell her journey here later, but very similar to mine. Like literally we started on the same day. Again, one of those scenarios where you look back at your life and it's a straight line leading you to exactly where you are. But at the time, it just feels crazy and chaotic. So back to the Mobility WOD and learning all these things. It wasn't long before Erin and I sort of not pressured, but got our mom and dad and sisters and the whole family into CrossFit. And, my dad's having a shoulder problem or a knee problem, or my mom is experiencing this, and just sort of teaching them, like showing them some videos that K-Star has, or, teaching them how to do certain things. And just spreading the CrossFit gospel, right? It's not a cult. So fast forward, I get out of the Navy in November of 11, and I come out here to Washington, D.C. I take a job in the government doing some submarine rescue stuff that I was doing in the Navy, but now as a project manager in the government. And the first thing I do, I sign up for a gym and I show up and it's okay. It's good. I like nothing bad to say about it, but CrossFit had changed a lot from when I started CrossFit Coronado in 2008 or 9. And then when I was here in DC in 2011, the CrossFit Games started and they were starting to move into Carson and just the whole CrossFit consciousness really exploded during those times. And I was talking to Erin and she was working out at a great gym and we were just like, you know what? I think there's a space here for us to create our own community, our own vision, our own mission for CrossFit. And we would just talk about it all the time about how when the CrossFit Games started, everybody's head just turned and like, yes, I want to win the CrossFit Games. I got to be the best at CrossFit. I got to start training CrossFit 4, 5, 6 times a day. I got to eat everything paleo. I'm never drinking beer again. Where do I get steroid? Just kidding about the steroid thing. But that's like when the game started, that's what everybody, or, from my perspective, that's where everybody was looking. And one of the things that Erin and I were talking about and passionate about is like we've been there. As Erin was also a collegiate swimmer at the Naval Academy, we've been there. We've been training not 4 or 5 times a day. I was going to say a week, and no, we've been training, 2-3 times a day for months and months on end, and we've been pushing ourselves to our absolute limit day in and day out, and really, that really wasn't what we were into. Like I had no aspirations to go to the CrossFit Games. Not that I could have if I had those aspirations. So it's not one of those things like I'm not good enough to make it to the CrossFit Games. But for me, my passion with CrossFit was very much in this 3, 4, 5 times per week thing where my body was ready for anything I wanted to do with it. I was ready to, I would hike mountains in the Sierra Nevadas with my buddy Matt. My body was ready for that. If I wanted to play basketball, my body was ready for that. If I wanted to literally do anything, there was nothing I wasn't ready for. I was legitimately prepared for life. And that's what I did CrossFit for. That's what Erin did CrossFit for. And every time that, there would be these competitions or this thing and oh man, you should do this. You should do this. I don't have any problem that you're doing it. I think it's really cool. I totally support that. But I would rather go play a sport. I would rather go for a hike. I would rather just do nothing, do nothing in the weekend. That's just, where my preference was. And so fast forward a few more months and, Erin and I are just talking about this all the time. And I think one day we're over at their house and Erin's husband, Jamie, is like, I should just start a gym. And we kind of laughed it off. And then he was like, no, seriously. And then we're like, oh, well, And then, we started thinking about it and then we started building business plans and figuring out what we would do and what our mission was and all these things. And ultimately what we realized is that there was absolutely a space for extremely passionate people who love CrossFit, but don't want to take it any more than what it is, just want to use CrossFit for this life and to use CrossFit to be prepared for what we're doing right here and right now. And Erin and I both connected very aggressively on that mindset. And so when we were starting to build the framework for the gym and the business plan and all the ideas for what became Old City CrossFit, it was surrounded around this idea that this is your family. This is where you come to just be prepared for life. And it's a loving, open, friendly, amazing, welcoming place where you can just show up and just do work, you don't even just show up. I mean, that's really one of the things I tell people all the time is just show up and don't try. Just show up and give yourself permission not to kill yourself, not to go as hard as you can. And that reduces the mental barriers. And so anyway, we had this idea. We were looking for space. We wanted it to be in sort of this general Capitol Hill area. And then we signed a lease in, May or June of 2013. And then the fun began. And so I think by the time we got our permitting and everything, it was October of 13 we started. And then we just started getting after it, and we started executing our vision. And since then, clearly we've changed a lot. We've learned a lot. We've grown a lot. We've added so many people to our team. And I think the one thing that's really stayed true with what we're doing at Old City CrossFit is this concept of preparing you for life. And that's certainly the thing that I'm most connected to. That's certainly the thing that Aaron's most connected to. And that's been the mainstay of our mission at Old City CrossFit. And in the process, we've met literally some of the greatest people in the world. And we've developed a team of absolutely incredible coaches, some of the most inspirational people you'll ever meet in your entire life. And I guess that brings me back to the purpose of this podcast. So I shared a lot of my story of how I found CrossFit, of how I found, or, assisted in the founding, I guess, of Old City CrossFit. And then what I want to do in the future is share with you people that I get inspiration from, that we as the Old City community get inspiration from, get motivation from, and share them with you. Because I think what we've been able to do, the community that we have at Old City CrossFit is one of the most incredible things, one of the most incredible experiences I've ever been able to be a part of. I was telling somebody, there was a question. What's the question? It said, if you really knew me, you'd know that. And finish the sentence. So that's the question, right? So if you really knew me, you know that. And then you're supposed to finish the sentence, and you're supposed to reveal something about yourself that maybe somebody wouldn't have otherwise known about you. And I was thinking about it as they were going around the room, and it got to me. And I was like, if you really knew me, you know that I'm deeply afraid. I have a fear of my biggest accomplishment in life being the fact that I was a submariner in the United States Navy, that I served on the USS Scranton. I'm afraid that that's the peak, right? I'm afraid that that's all my life was, and everything since then will be downhill. And I think largely to some extent, we all have this fear that the last accomplishment you had is going to be the biggest accomplishment of your life, and everything moving forward is downhill. But as I started to share that with some of my friends around the gym, they started to make me realize what a special community, what a great environment that, certainly I've helped build, that our coaches have helped build, that my sister has helped build, but most importantly, that you are a part of, that you are building every single day. You, the old citizen, the person who shows up 2-3 times a week, the person who, participates in our happy hours and, just comes to the gym and comments on our Facebook page. And, it's you, it's the old citizen. You are the community, and you are what I'm so grateful to be a part of. And it's really just genuinely I'm no longer worried about the submarining being the apex of my life, right? I know for a fact that right here, right now, this is the apex. I'm literally, every day I wake up, I'm so insanely grateful for everything that I'm a part of, and everything that exists in the gym and with the community that we've built and the people that I get to know. And it's out of that gratitude that I want to start this podcast, and I want to share the people that touch me so passionately, and that I meet and that I get so fired up about talking to. And I'm just going to bring these people to you, whether they're gym members, whether they're coaches, whether they're people from outside the gym that I'm just super excited about. And we're going to call this thing the Preparing You for Life podcast. And I'm super pumped. And there is a cat right next to me sniffing the microphone. Maybe Yogi will be our first guest. Do you want to say anything, Yogi? Yogi doesn't want to say anything, so pretty lame guest if you ask me. So anyway, stay tuned. I'm super excited to see where this goes. This is my story, and I'm super, super thankful that you listened to it. So anyway, that's all I got. Sean Dog out.